Hi everyone, Cam here from Yes Auto, and today I'm driving a Volkswagen, because you see this is a day after the company announced that they were going to change their name to Volkswagen instead of Volkswagen, and everybody thought it was really funny. Anyway, this is the ID.4, and it's the company's second mass-produced electric car, the first being the ID.3. Now, we reviewed the ID.3 relatively recently and thought it was a very good car, if a little bit dull. Can the ID.4 inject some excitement into the company's electric range with its striking yellow paint? Well, today we're going to find out. But before I get into the review, remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. I like how the ID.4 looks like it's related to the ID.3. Both cars have got their distinct styling, but it's clear that they're related in the electric car family. But what sets the ID.4 apart is you've got a much flatter SUV-like front end that I think gives the car a bit more of a presence. You've also got this white line that runs along the width of the car, and you'd think that would be a body-wide LED light. But it isn't actually, it's only the headlights that light up. This is simply just a white stripe, so it's not like the new Volkswagen Golf where that would light up. Also got a white, nice big new VW badge on there as well. Moving further down, these are actual vents. They're not designed to make the car look more aggressive. They actually channel air around through the wheel arch and out through the wheel to improve downforce and reduce drag. Now, this is what is the big difference between the ID.3 and the ID.4. They've both got the same raked windscreen, but we come back here and we've obviously got this SUV-like body shape. And it's a coupe-like roofline, which I feel like I say every time I talk about an SUV, but it's what people like. It just makes the car look a little bit sleeker. So the roof slopes downwards a little bit towards the rear of the car. And there's also this little spoiler back here. Now, as you'll find out in a bit, there's actually only one trim level. So this isn't a version that you'd get on the sports model. This just comes as standard at the moment. And at the back of the car, we have a body-wide tail light cluster with a reflector that runs either end and also two lights either side. Now, what I do like is the ID.4 badge is in white. I really like the look of that because it almost makes it look a little bit like ceramic. It's a nice little kind of way to touch it off, particularly as everything at the moment is in matte black. At the back of the ID.4, we have a pretty damn big boot. And to put a number on pretty damn big would be 543 litres. Now that's significantly more than what you get on the Ford Mustang Mach-E, which we actually have here today, and we're doing a little comparison of the two, so stay tuned for that video. Now the 543 litres in here is actually a little bit smaller than what you get on the Skoda Enyaq, which is based on the ID.4 and boasts a boot size of 585 litres. Now you can watch our full breakdown of that car by clicking the link in the top right hand corner. Still, you've got loads of space back here. You're not going to feel shortchanged for going for this over the Enyaq. And what I like about this as well is that there's a small little storage compartment under the boot floor to stow away your charging cables so they don't take up any precious boot space. Now, being an electric car, there's nothing of any importance really under the bonnet. We don't even get a front boot, or frunk as the Americans call it. But it's a good excuse to talk about the powertrains. And on the ID.4, we've only got one motor currently available, and it's a 201 brake horsepower electric motor slung over the rear axle. Now, it's good for a 0 to 62 time of 8.5 seconds, which isn't too fast or isn't too slow. It's pretty average. But electric cars deliver most of their torque really low down, so a 0 to 30 dash will be pretty damn quick. Now, it's mated to a 77 kilowatt hour battery, which is good for a range of 323 miles. Now later this year, you'll be able to get a smaller 52 kilowatt hour battery with a range of 224 miles. And VW is also going to introduce some smaller motors as well, one producing 146 brake horsepower and the other 168. They'll all be rear-wheel drive though for some slidey action. You can't drift this though, I've tried, you can't do it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's only one ID.4 to choose from, so buying the car is actually pretty straightforward. It's one car called the First Edition, and it costs £40,800. Now, if you've been doing your research, you may be wondering, isn't that a little bit more expensive than it has been? And you would be right. And that's because a couple of weeks ago, the government changed its plug-in car grant. Before the change, it used to give you £3,500 on a new electric car costing £50,000 or less. That's now changed to £35,000 or less, so this no longer applies for the grant, which is a pain. However, with cheaper models on the horizon, you might be able to find a bit more of a discount if you wait until the end of the year and get one of the less powerful cars. Now, when I first got in here, I thought it was going to be pretty much exactly the same as the ID.3. And in some ways it is. Most of the dashboard is taken from the ID.3, apart from the odd subtle difference, such as the controls for the lights and windscreen heater are on the right-hand side instead of the left-hand side on the ID.3. But this center console is actually very different. So while the ID.3 has two fixed cup holders here, on the ID.4, you've actually got a bit that you can take out. So you put the cups in there if you want to, or you can just have it as one big storage bin. And further back, we've also got another little sleek place to go and put your phone when you're driving along with two USB chargers. And then we've got this nice big storage area down here with a few dividers. So you could put lots of different keys down there if you want to, and they wouldn't get mixed up. Now, the thing that dominates the cabin, and I've gone on about this quite a lot in VW reviews, is the touchscreen infotainment system plonked right in the middle here. Now, on something like the Volkswagen Golf, if you click the link in the top right-hand corner, by the way, you can watch my review of the Volkswagen Golf R, it's integrated quite poorly. You get this big kind of clumpy mass of screens in the centre of the dash. But on the ID.4, and in the case with the ID.3 as well, they're really neatly integrated. So it sits separate to the digital instrument cluster. Now, the system itself is a bit of a mixed bag. It looks fantastic. It's a really sharp looking display and is one of the best looking infotainment systems, I think, on the market. Using it, however, is a bit of a pain. So let's say if I wanted to go and change certain aspects of the vehicle, I can't just go through menus or anything like that. I have to bring up a 3D image of the car and spin around it if I want to go into the braking system, or if I wanted to go into the central locking, or if I go to the interior, I can then adjust the lighting and the cockpit settings, and it's all just a bit of a faff. Could you not just give that to me as a list? I do, however, like the little screen that's directly in front of you because it just gives you the basic information, your speed, your battery usage, and also when you're charging and using power. It's also really crisp and it's got this beautiful colour to it, so it just gives the car more of a premium feel. Now, what's different on the ID.3 and on the ID.4 compared to other electric cars is you've got this little gear selector knob triangle thing next to the screen. So instead of selecting gears with a small gear selector in the center console, you just push it back to go into reverse, push it forward to go into drive, push it forward again to go into the energy recovery section. And then when you want to push it in park, there's a little button on the right hand side of it. Now, the backbeats in the ID.3 were superb and the ID.4 is no exception. I've got a lot of room back here. So I'm just under 6 foot and the driver's seat is in my position. And look at the amount of legroom that I have. You could literally fit a bus through there. And then there's headroom, which is really decent. So I'm sat up straight, and if you're 6 foot and above, you're going to have lots of room. Now, the seats are lovely and comfy. We've got a mix of leather in the centre and fabric in the middle, but the seat is actually lower at the back than it is at the front. So it means that you kind of sink into them nicely. It's almost got a sporty feel to it. Now, connectivity-wise, we've got 2 USB-C sockets, a couple of vents, and a completely pointless little tray. But what I find quite strange is there's no way to change the climate settings back here as standard. This is a first edition car. You'd expect it to be loaded up, but it's missing some really key standard features. You don't even get wireless charging as standard. This is the most expensive car. Why? "It just works" gets thrown around so often nowadays, but I think it really sums up modern VWs. This ID.4, as soon as you step into it and turn a wheel in it, just feels like a really solid and superb product. Now, we're on a twisty road at the moment, and I think the best thing to do is start off with the steering. It is so incredibly light and responsive. It just means that you can position the car with so much confidence. It is the typical thing of being a VW. The steering's a little bit numb, but this isn't a sports car, it's not a performance car, it's not designed to be brimming with feel. It does the job wonderfully. The only thing I will say though is that as we're on a twisty road, it is quite bumpy, it's very rural, and I find that the ID.4 is just a little bit springy and a bit bouncy at slower speeds. Doesn't seem to be an issue when you build up speeds and get onto a motorway, but at the moment I just feel like it's wobbling around a little bit. It just kind of feels a little bit uneasy. Definitely not a deal breaker by any means, but just the odd bump can unsettle the car a little bit. I also love the way it just delivers power so effortlessly and so smoothly. So I recently had a Tesla Model 3, and if you click the link in the top right hand corner, you can watch my review of it. And it was so much fun because the power was ridiculous. Anytime you put your foot down, you were thrown to the back of your seat. And if you left it in its standard mode, it could get a little bit jarring after a while, although you could turn it down before you Tesla people start picking me apart. Whereas in the ID.4, it's not nearly as fast, it's not nearly as powerful, but it's just smooth. It picks up pace really quickly. Typical thing in an electric car of where that 0 to 30 time is really nice and low. So pulling out of a junction or onto a motorway is dead simple. We recently had the Mustang Mach-E in, and I found the brakes on that to be a little jarring actually, because if you put your foot on the brake, there was a little bit of a dead zone of where it didn't really do anything, and then it kind of clamped and grabbed a little bit. Whereas on the ID.4, it's smooth and progressive. The harder you press, the quicker you come to a stop. And that brings me on to regenerative braking. Now, on some electric cars, you can actually vary the intensity of regenerative braking. So you can either turn it off so the car just cruises when you lift off the accelerator, or you can have it on quite a severe setting that will feel like you're doing not far off an emergency stop. On the ID.4, there's only really two settings. There's normal mode, which basically feels like a normal electric car. When you lift off the accelerator, it just keeps on cruising. But then there's this, they call it B. So if I press the drive stalk forward once more, it then goes into the regenerative mode. And it's kind of a middle ground. I feel like it's slightly more intense than what we had on the ID.3. I might be imagining it though. But it doesn't feel that severe. It very much is a case of lift off the accelerator and the brakes are gently applied, but that's about it. I know that VW are quite efficient when it comes to this stuff, and it does regenerate a fair bit of battery power. What I will say though is it means you can't do one pedal driving. So on a lot of cars, you can literally drive the car with the accelerator alone. The regenerative braking is that intense that you can use it as a regular brake. Whereas on here, you do come to a gradual stop. But I found earlier that you couldn't actually come to a complete stop. So if I lifted off the accelerator, you would cruise along at 3 miles an hour. So you still have to physically use the brake. Now, like a lot of electric cars, we have a nice mix of semi-autonomous gadgetry to keep us on the road and not crash when we're cruising on the motorway. So I've got lane keep assist on at the moment, which keeps the car very much in the center of the lane. You do have to keep your hands on the wheel, but it just means the car does a lot of the hard work for you. And there's also active cruise control as well. So I've got a lorry in front of me that's starting to slow down. I had set the cruise at 70 and now it's slowing down to 60 miles an hour. But I'm going to overtake him. And when cruising on the motorway, this is typical Volkswagen. Very smooth, very quiet, very refined. And because we've got what is essentially a really short front end, you've got this really raked windscreen and a very short front end. The car is a lot more slippery than, let's say, a Tiguan or a Touareg or something like that. So you find there's less wind noise. So not only have you got less noise from not having a combustion engine in front, there's a little bit less wind noise as well. Barely any noise coming from the tyres or the road. So let's go through 3 things I like about the ID.4 and 3 things I'm not keen on. So the first thing I really like is just the way it drives. It is so easy to get in here, get behind the wheel and get driving. It feels normal. Now some people might not like that. They like an electric car to feel special, feel very different. I think the ID.4 feels very much like a normal car in a lot of ways. And I think that's going to help a lot of people that aren't too sure about going electric, and when they go and drive this, they'll realise that it's pretty much the same thing as their petrol car. The second thing I like is actually being able to change the driving modes, and it really alters the characteristics of the car. Now going into sport mode doesn't turn it into a racing car, but it provides a real noticeable shove. You'll be surprised of how many modern cars today offer different driving modes, and it is really hard to tell the difference. And the third thing I like is that the battery readout is a realist and not an optimist. So many electric cars you get in now will say, you have 4 million miles of range, and then as soon as you turn a corner and they go, oh, I wasn't expecting you to actually accelerate during this journey, we're going to drop that down to 60. Whereas with everything that I've got on at the moment, we've got a bit of aircon on in March, I've got a bit of air conditioning on at the moment, and also it's not in its most eco-friendly mode. I'm down to 188 miles with 80% battery left, which is fine. I'm not expecting to get the full plus 300 mile range from it, although I would like it to be a little bit better than it actually is. 3 things I don't like. First is the infotainment system. I batter it enough in other videos, so I'm not going to go too hard on it just here, but it's just a real pain and laggy, and I think it's a bit rubbish. The second thing, I really wish I could do 1 pedal driving in this. You can kind of do 1.5 pedal driving, but it's not as good as the other ones. And I think there is a satisfaction of modulating the accelerator and getting more energy when you lift off. And the third thing is a bit of a personal note. I think it's really good to drive. I think it's very well refined, but it's also a bit boring. Overall though, I think the ID.4 is a really great addition. I think you've got a properly good range on offer. At £40,000, it is on the expensive side, but I am expecting cheaper models to become available a little later on. And of course, if you think it's a bit expensive, you could always head over to yesauto.com and check out all the deals that we've got on new and used ID.4s when they become available.